My guest on the podcast today is none other than Raphael from Wealthy Expat. Now, living overseas and having location independence is something that I am extremely passionate about. And this is what Raphael specializes in: how to get multiple passports and how to live wherever you want. So if you've ever thought about expanding your horizons in this regard, then this is the podcast for you. We had an amazing chat. We covered many different topics, and I know that you will love it. So with that, let's get into it. All right, Raphael, Wealthy Expat, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Awesome. Happy to be here, man.
So I've been watching your content for a few years now. How long have you been doing this for, by the way?
Well, I founded the company 2 years ago. I've been doing YouTube for around 7 years, but Wealthy Expat officially has been 2 years.
Yeah, and you've been killing it. So, first of all, let's get a bit of an introduction as to who you are, what Wealthy Expat is, and the whole premise behind it, because it's something that I'm really passionate about as well.
Awesome. We help high net worth individuals and pretty much anybody in the world. They don't need to have a certain net worth to go somewhere where they have more freedom and they enjoy the money better. So regardless of what income you have, typically we work with higher level people because it's easier. You can find a lot more places that fit your budget. Whereas if you have less money, then it's harder. We want them to help escape the West, escape the wokeness, escape the, I don't want to call it indoctrination, but it's very similar to that. And that's exactly what's happening in the West right now. And we want to move away from that. We want to find other places, and not necessarily one place, but having multiple bases, multiple passports, multiple residencies, and overall opening up people's minds. Because a lot of people in Australia, in the United States, they've only been in their country for their whole life. They don't know about anything else. We want to open up their minds.
100%. And this is one of the interesting things about this lifestyle. And it's something that, for me, it was almost like I had to break down a few mental barriers to get there, because I always knew that I didn't quite feel at home in Australia. Like, obviously it's my home, but I always knew that I just wanted to experience more, live in other places. Whenever I went traveling, I really identified with other cultures. And especially with the degeneracy that you mentioned that's been happening in the West over the past, few years, probably more than that. It kind of felt to me like I was quite disenfranchised by the whole culture. So moving was something that I knew that I wanted to do, but I was like, how would I possibly do that? And how would you set up? I don't know how I get a passport in other countries. But then you start watching guys like yourself and you start to realize that it's actually pretty accessible for pretty much anyone. So let's start from ground zero. For somebody who's got this notion, who thinks that they might want to potentially live overseas, they have their own business or think they might want to start their own business, where would you start in terms of looking at your options abroad?
Well, Jake, I would look at geographically your region, first of all. So if you're from Australia, I have a lot of clients in Australia that go to countries that nobody else would go to. So for example, an Australian might go to Vanuatu, and that's a very close flight, 2 hours. I've been there. It's very beautiful. It's also tax-free. So you get the idea of another tax-free country. It might not be the one to live in, but geographically you look at other places. Let's say from Australia, you might look at Thailand. That's a very popular one. You get a flight to Thailand, and a lot of Aussies live there. Or you might look at Malaysia, Singapore, depending on the net worth. So first of all, look at geographically where you can go. Then second, look at the places that are not really pushing anything onto its citizens. They're not pushing, for example, digital money. They're not pushing more taxation, more restrictions. They're closing your bank accounts. You want to avoid any of those places. And many people think that, oh, what's better than Australia? Canada? There's 100 other options around the world that you can look at, not just the Western world. For example, if you're in Europe, if you're in the UK or in the US, you have a lot more options. You have Portugal now, which is crypto tax-free. Although they are heading in the direction of taxing crypto and restricting more, it's still kind of a safe haven for Europe. And you obviously have places like Dubai and the UAE, which is tax-free. Crypto is not taxed. You can pretty much do whatever you want when it comes to your personal taxes, your company taxes. You can run a YouTube channel and criticize not the UAE government, but pretty much any other government. There's no digital money. There's no heading in the direction of pushing you and restricting you. There's absolutely none of that. And those are the places that I typically recommend people go to. Our main hub is Dubai. That's where we have our office, and where we have our biggest team. But it might be a little bit of a culture shock for some people. If you're coming from Australia, Dubai might be a big of a jump. You might want to consider Thailand, Malaysia, some countries in Asia. And then once you're ready, you go to Dubai.
And the lifestyle is so so amazing as well in those places. And personally, it really suits me as well because I don't like being told what to do every step of the way. And I find that in places like I was spent like a few months in Thailand, you don't want to insult the king in Thailand because you'll get in big trouble. You don't want to mess with drugs in Thailand, or else you're in big trouble. You don't want to end up in the Bangkok Hilton, which is the prison in Bangkok. But for the most part, you get left alone, you know? And I like that. I don't like being told how fast I have to drive at every single thing. And then there's all these cameras coming in on the roads, and now they're installing cameras on the streets and in the parks, and they tell you. And I don't know if you saw in lockdown, they had like the drones following the people around who were like taking their dog for a walk in a mountain range. And it's just like, this stuff is absolute insanity. So, yeah, the lifestyle is good over there, but one of the things that I find is quite a difficult hurdle to overcome is to understand what you have to do to actually acquire residencies or to acquire working permits in these places. So maybe if we want to start at like a low level barriers for entry up until you get to the more sort of high level in terms of these low tax places.
I would say it's pretty straightforward in any country that wants to attract wealth. If you were to, let's say, get a visa to go to the United States, to live in the United States, the barrier to entry is so high. You need to spend at least $1 million. You need to have a lot of assets. You need to essentially have a lot more because there's a lot more demand. But there's countries that want your wealth. They want you to come. They want you to invest. They want you to buy their passports. And there's many countries around the world where you might not necessarily live in, but you can get their citizenship. I have citizenship in St. Kitts and Nevis. For any people in the US or Canada, they might know this country. Other people, they might have never heard of it. It's a small island in the Caribbean. And you can give them $125,000 and they will grant you citizenship for life, your family as well, and they will give you a passport. Now you have a second passport, which as an Australian, we saw in the last couple of years, well, sometimes even as an Australian, you can't even leave your country. You can't even come back to your country if you have only one passport. But now that you have two passports, and let's say your country heads in the direction of canceling passports, which some countries have headed towards, mainly in the West, the big four English-speaking countries. If they cancel your passport, well, now you have another one. And that one gives you access to over 150 countries around the world, visa-free. Or you can invest into a country through real estate. In the case of Portugal, for example, you might buy property. After 7 years, you get citizenship. In the case of Greece, you can also get a residency permit and then citizenship. In the case of Turkey, although it's not that great of a passport, it's another option. So depending on your budget, that's the biggest thing that's going to change. So let's say you want to go to a place and you have $100,000. Well, we could do a visa in Dubai for $25,000. Then we could get a residency in Thailand, the Thai Elite visa for $20,000. And then we could do something like a residency in Serbia, in Eastern Europe for another $5,000-$10,000. So now you're covering 3 geographical areas, and you might also get a passport later on if you have another $100,000. But if you only have $5,000 or $7,000, then we're looking at working with maybe one visa in one country. Let's say in Europe, that might be the retirement visa in Portugal, or that might be a small residency permit in Montenegro, which is a small Eastern European country. It's also very beautiful. You might rent an apartment, get residency that way. So depending on your budget, it expands the options. But I would say if you're serious about this, if you really want to protect yourself against your government, and you have at least $400,000, $500,000, maybe you own a house in Australia that's worth 1.2 million. Well, you could sell that house, get yourself a second passport, and then buy a cheaper house somewhere else and enjoy the same lifestyle without any of the restrictions.
Yes, absolutely. And another big like obstacle that you have to face as well, I mean, it appears big, but it's actually much easier than it feels, is also setting your business up overseas. So in terms of moving your business, say if you've already got an established business, but you can work online, or maybe you've got even a job that you can work online, but more about business for this one, and you know that you can do it all remotely, and you wanted to move from a Western country, USA, Canada, Britain, Australia, to say a Montenegro, how difficult is that process?
I would have moved the business to the place where you're moving yourself. The only case would be Dubai. What I would say is your business, yourself, your employees, your banks don't all need to be in one place. So what you can do is, let's say you want the Italian lifestyle, you could have it for 4 to 5 months a year without paying tax, without becoming a tax resident of Italy. You're still a tourist in Italy. You could have a company in Dubai, pay zero taxes in Dubai. The rest of the time, you could go to a place like Mexico that is not that restrictive with taxes. And getting a residency permit is very straightforward. Costs you, let's say, just to show income of $3,000 to $5,000 a month, and then the actual processing is around 5,000. So you basically spend a little bit to get a residency permit in Mexico. You have a company in Dubai, which you could also get residency from, so you could spend some time in Dubai. And the rest of the time you spend it in Italy. This gets harder if you have kids and they're in school full time, if you have a wife and that wife doesn't actually want to move with you, or if you have elderly family. I have a lot of clients that are taking care of their parents or grandparents, so that's obviously harder. But the gist of it is that not everything needs to be in the same place. And you could also have banking, let's say through Wise, the online banking service. You could have banking in the US and the UK while not even touching those countries and not paying tax in those countries, just having the online bank account in those countries.
So is it possible to have, so I'll just use myself as an example. So I've got my YouTube and everything set up in Australia, and I've got like my Australian business number all set up with my YouTube. Would I need to then take my whole business and offshore that, or like take that whole business to Dubai and then set it up there? Or could I keep the business and everything in Australia and then not pay tax by living somewhere else?
No, because the business registered in Australia, therefore will be taxed in Australia. You might take some deductions based on living somewhere else, but honestly, that's not really a good idea because the ATO, the Australian Tax Authority, can always tax you. So let's say you're coming from Australia. Your company needs to move and you need to move. So your company, let's say, moves to Dubai. Now you do need to be careful because if you're a YouTuber, I don't know if many YouTubers are watching this, but if you're a YouTuber, you need to take advantage of tax treaties for your YouTube channel. Because if you go to a country that does not have a tax treaty, your AdSense revenue will be withheld by YouTube. So this is also an extra step. You need to count for tax treaties and you need to research tax treaties. We have a whole YouTube channel about taxes and how you can minimize that legally. So you move your company to Dubai. Let's say you want to keep a US bank account. So you open up a US LLC. US companies owned by foreign nationals are not taxed. So your US company is not taxed. Your Dubai company is not taxed. And then you personally can go live, let's say, as you're doing now, doing the digital nomad life through Europe and then through Latin America. And then you go back to Australia for a month. You also need to make sure that you exit Australia properly. A lot of countries around the world, especially Western countries, they want to restrict you. They want to grab your money. They have exit taxes. So when you escape Australia, you're also paying them a tax to escape. And depending on the net worth that you have, the tax gets higher. So if right now you're worth, let's say you have a business and that business makes good money, you're worth maybe a couple $100,000, and you're thinking, oh, I'll leave when I'm a multimillionaire. Yeah, well, it's going to cost you a lot more. It's going to cost you maybe 10 times what it's going to cost you now to leave. And you could also reach the same goal by being in another country.
Yeah, it's difficult sort of getting to that place where you're not really like a tax resident anymore. And I've done a lot of the research into, and like for me, for example, one of the things that'll be holding me back is that I've got a student loan that I haven't paid. I went to like 4 different universities and never even got a degree. Idiot. And now it's holding me back. I knew that would happen. But Raphael, one of the things that I love, like I'm quite passionate about myself, is gaining this freedom, because if you look at the direction of the way that the world's going and some of the policies that are being implemented, it's pretty scary, especially when you're looking at things like central bank digital currencies and the control in which some governments are going to be having over their citizens in these regards. So what are some of the common concerns that you see, and how do you, and what are some, so I guess we could maybe lay out some of the common concerns and the reasons why people maybe should be thinking about these options.
I would say CBDC is a big one because once they control your money, they can tax it. They can essentially allow you to spend it or not, depending on your behavior. And China is a great example. China, basically, if the money, you haven't used it up to a certain amount, up to a certain point, it expires. So you literally cannot use your money anymore, even though you saved it up. You also, if you have certain behaviors, let's say maybe you drink too much because you like drinking, or you buy a lot of meat because you just like eating meat like a normal person. They might restrict your access to that and might restrict your amount of meat that you consume. Basic human freedoms that should be completely unrestricted. This is the way the government is going. And you see this with the World Economic Forum, with all these people that are not elected, that are planning how the world is in the direction that the world is going. And they're obviously working with government officials to make sure that plan is in place. I would say the first thing is to look at cash heavy societies. So this is tricky because cash is becoming harder to use. In places like Europe, for example, if you buy a purchase more than 10,000 euros in cash, it could be considered a felony. Like it's literally a felony to use your money. In some cases, you cannot take money out of the ATM in many cases in certain amounts. I go to places like I said, Dubai, Southeast Asia, even though it's a little bit more dangerous, Latin America, that could work, Mexico, Colombia, cash heavy societies. And you want to go to these places that are not going the direction of CBDCs, that are actually going the direction of more crypto friendliness, and they use crypto on a daily basis. For example, El Salvador has cleaned up their gang problem. They cleaned up their violence problem. They allowed Bitcoin to be the currency of the country. And now they're heading in the direction of becoming the next Switzerland or Singapore. I really see a
Isn't
lot
it
of
funny?
potential in El Salvador.
Just really, really quickly on El Salvador. Don't you think that it's fishy how when they have a president at the moment who's doing some fantastic things, he's cleaning up the crime. Like you said, he's very crypto friendly and he's the good kind of progressive president. Isn't it funny how he gets so much backlash for that? Don't you think that that's a little bit strange?
It's not strange. It's very clear. I mean, at this point, if you trust mainstream media, you're kind of a sheep. Like it's not you. It's really very in a certain direction, and it's all planned properly. And when the media sees, oh wait, there's a country that is slashing taxes, that cured their violence problem, that violence is increasing in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, and Australia, but this country completely cleaned it out. They had a year without murders, which is impossible in any other country. And they have Bitcoin as the main currency. That doesn't fit the agenda. It's just impossible that that country exists. So let's absolutely slammer them. Let's call the president a dictator. Let's say not move there. It's a terrible place. It's actually worse than people are saying. And obviously it threatens their agenda. So they have to squash it as much as possible. And that's what you've seen with the part of the world where I am right now, which is the far east of Europe. I won't mention the country because it might get blocked here. But I really like this part of the world. I really like the far eastern European traditional value society where people don't really trust the government. They don't really trust the mainstream media. They don't really follow what the government says. So they use cash a lot. They use crypto a lot. They are into freedom a lot. So if you like freedom and you really want to be in a place where it has a lot of freedom, I would say Eastern Europe, outside of the European Union, is definitely something to consider.
Interesting. So in that Far Eastern place that you're not going to mention, I mean, how are you living there, or are you just there temporarily?
No, I'm here temporarily, and dating in this part of the world is really good. So if you're a single man, you'll basically have a lot of fun here, and it's a great place not to do business, not to have a bank account, but just to escape the wokeness, as I say. So it's a place that has absolutely no wokeness, and that's also a point. Is you can combine countries around the world as a tourist as well. So my personal citizenship portfolio is St. Kitts. I also have Serbian citizenship because I invest a lot in Serbia. I buy a lot of projects in Serbia. I have a team there. So you could pick 2 citizenships from around the world. I renounce my US citizenship. And then you can have residencies like a Dubai residency, a Thai residency. And now you have 4 different countries that you could potentially go to. And then you spend time in other places as a tourist. So you could go to Montenegro and be a tourist. You could go to Greece, Italy, Spain. And I really like Spain. I absolutely love it. It's a great lifestyle, but I wouldn't get attached to the taxes. And also it's heading in a very weird progressive way where Spain really wants people, like they're indoctrinating children the same way that the US is indoctrinating them. That's also something apart from CBDCs that scares me, is when I have children, I put them into school. What are they going to learn? They're going to learn gender identity instead of learning biology and chemistry. And that really scares me, honestly.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't know if you saw that Spain had some weird things recently with like they didn't let their people turn their air conditioning up to a certain level, and it's all just very strange authoritarian big bureaucratic governments. But then from that, and from all of the madness that we're seeing, I feel like the light at the end of the tunnel is being shown by the countries that are looking at that and saying, hey, if we do the opposite, we're going to attract a lot of wealthy people to come into our country. Georgia did that. Um, when they did their zero tax for foreign income policy. And I feel like that's been amazingly beneficial for the country. And I think a lot of countries are kind of looking at that and thinking, if we just like sort of make it more business friendly in our country, we're going to attract a lot of wealthy people to come in, invest in our country. We're not going to arrest them and put them in prison like some countries want to do. But that's the light at the end of the tunnel that I see, is that in the competitive marketplace, the countries that are clamping down are going to get more crime. They're going to get poorer. Their cities are not going to be as nice to live in, because you need that big capital and that investment in the countries. And then all of these countries who have been struggling for so long now will see a gap in the market and be like, hey, come in, we'll welcome you. So what are the main countries that you're seeing that are playing it smart in that regard?
There's a lot of them. I would say mainly, although it's heading in the woke direction, I would say Latin America is a place to consider. Mexico is definitely welcoming a lot of people. Mexico has seen a big influx of high net worth individuals from the US and Canada. Other countries in Latin America, like Argentina, has seen a big influx, and Brazil as well, just because you can have citizenship by birth there. So, what a lot of very smart and rich people do is they send their wives or their girlfriend to Brazil. They have a child in Brazil, and now the child is born Brazilian. So, this is another way of getting a citizenship. That's one part of the world. I would say Europe overall is heading in the wrong direction, but you have some outliers like Switzerland, of course. So Switzerland, if you're at a very high net worth level, then you can invest into Switzerland, get a residency permit, kind of be away from the EU while still being in the center of Europe in an extremely beautiful country.
Mm.
Eastern Europe, a lot of freedom. You can do whatever you want with your money. People don't really restrict you. Turkey, although the currency has devalued a lot, it might not be the most fun, or I would say the most developed place to live in. It's definitely free. I mean, you can buy property with Bitcoin. You can do whatever you want. The government doesn't really care about you unless you're a citizen. So you have Turkey. You also have the Middle East, Dubai, UAE, best place to be. And there's also other places like, although it's not open yet, but it's opening up. And this is to the point that you said. There's some countries that are realizing, wait, if you do the opposite, we're going to attract people. Saudi Arabia, a country that has forever been closed off to people, has not welcomed foreigners, now has zero taxes, has relaxed a lot of laws. Women don't need to cover up if they're foreign. You can pretty much do whatever you want. And they're opening up ways of opening a company, being 100% owner, and then paying zero taxes in Saudi Arabia. So you'll see these countries that were extremely closed for 20, 30 years, and now they're opening up again. And then the last region of the world would be Asia, as I mentioned many times already. And it depends on your lifestyle, I would say, net worth, because if your net worth is extremely high, then I would say get citizenship in Malta, which is a small European country. It costs you $1 million. Have a residency permit in Switzerland, then invest somewhere like Serbia or Dubai or anywhere you want, really. Whereas if you have a small amount of net worth, a small amount of income, then just move to Thailand on a work visa and then live there and have a little bit more freedom. So it obviously depends on your budget.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate to anybody who's listening to this who might be thinking about doing something similar, there are so many options out there, and you don't have to feel restricted in the country that you're living in. If you're feeling like it's going in the wrong direction, there are just so many options. And also, another way in which you have a lot of options, and I've got a YouTube channel, like a travel channel, where I go around and speak to girls from different cities. I'll just do little interviews in the streets. That's another way, and you've got so many options. Like I'm in Italy at the moment, and Italian girls and Argentinian girls, it's a fight at the top of the ladder there. But are some of my favorite girls in the world, because they're so feminine, they're very traditional, they're very sweet. They a lot of them are very intelligent. They have hobbies and knowledge and all these sorts of things that I was really not seeing much of in terms of when I was in Australia. And I feel like the culture is just very different. So I've been really enjoying my interactions with girls in Europe and in South America and even Asia as well. So tell me, how have you found that? Are you a single man?
Yeah, I am. I am. I was married 2 years, but I'm divorced now, so I am technically. Then what I would say to that is Italians or Europeans are beautiful. They have that heritage, they have that tradition, but they're losing it. And they're losing it mainly due to feminism, I think. Feminism in Europe, it's rampant. It's very strong, and a lot of them believe in it quite heartedly. When I was in Australia 2 months. I can say that was the worst dating pool I've ever seen
Hmm.
compared to some cities in the United States. Like, yeah, Australia was rough. If you're an Australian and you're rich, get out. There's better women in other places. What I would say for me personally, Eastern European is my style. So Russian, uh, all Serbian, all this type of uh, let's say ethnicities or nationalities is my particular style. And as a wealthy man, or even if you're making like double the average salary in that country, you don't really even need to be wealthy. You can just get a really nice apartment as a foreign person with good qualities. You're attractive, you're charming. You would really do 10 times better by going to another country,
Yeah.
because in the US and Australia, you have this feminism. You have a lot of women that have this giant checklist of things they want in a man, where maybe some Italian girl from a small village, she just wants a guy that makes her laugh, that makes enough money that it won't make her parents feel ashamed, and he has some experience around the world, or maybe he's a little bit older than her. So you see that the checklist kind of goes down as you travel. For women, women get more beautiful, more traditional, less feminist, and overall you have a lot better experience. And if you think, oh, it's really hard because of the language, just learn like the top 20, 25 words, go on a dating app, and then you'll absolutely crush it. So
100% could not agree with everything you just said more. And especially the part about Australia being a very, very rough dating pool. And also, like you mentioned, Europe so woke, especially towards the north of Europe and even in Italy as well. Very, very sort of progressive, lots of feminism here. But I'm staying with my family that are a little bit out of the city. So it's actually quite nice. And like my cousin and all of her friends, they're such sweet girls, and like it's such a breath of fresh air. And honestly, it puts everything into perspective for you to be like, oh, there is hope out there. There are still girls out there who like understand men as well, and who like understand what guys want and how to make a guy happy, and just and I think it's rather simple at the end of the day. Like, guys generally want to be just respected. We want to be just shown respect, and then if we feel that respect, then we'll reciprocate to no end. So, but also Eastern European girls are great as well. I went to Romania and I was there for a few weeks as well, and yeah, they're absolutely beautiful. And I just feel like the gender roles are a little bit more understood. Like, guys act like guys, and girls appreciate guys who act like guys. you know Whereas it's not like in the West, where I feel like people have to constantly pretend that they like this thing, when we all know that you don't like simpy weird blue pill guys. Whereas
uh,
the Romanian girls are just like, yeah, I want like a rich man, I want him to be handsome, I want him to beat the shit out of anyone who tries to take my handbag. That's it.
yeah, you do need to be careful in Eastern Europe with that money mindset, because some girls, they grow up thinking, oh, I just want a rich man who takes care of me. So it might get a little bit toxic, but I agree 100%. Where it's in the US, women want so many things, but they want to also control the relationship. They want to be a feminist in the relationship, whereas women in these parts of the world, they really appreciate like when you open the door for them, or when you go to a restaurant and you pull back the chair so she sits down and she's like, "Oh my god, I was so happy when you did that." It costs you nothing. Or when you buy
Mm.
her a book, like literally, you could buy the girl a book and she's like, "Oh my god, I'm so thankful," and it was like $5. Whereas in the US, they'll be happy only if you buy them a car or something. Yeah.
And furthermore to that point as well, like I'm quite a romantic guy. Like, I really enjoy romance. I like buying flowers and taking out for nice dates and all and that sort of thing. And I found that in these European countries, if it they really appreciate that over here. Like they'll be blown away if you buy them flowers. Whereas in Australia, it's kind of like the girls almost see it as like a red flag, like, oh, it's like too much, and you have to like make sure that they've really earned that thing. Whereas romantic gestures over here are something that are like so embedded within the culture. So yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed dating over here, and it's another thing that especially guys who, and if you're, decent looking, you earn a decent income, you can hold a conversation, you can make them laugh, you'll have a great time over here. And I've heard stories about, especially in that Far Eastern European place that you're talking about, that there's quite a demand for that. So
Yeah, and the volume also. You have a lot more volume in these countries. So let's say you're from one place that I absolutely hated was Gold Coast in Queensland. I was there
disgusting.
and I thought, oh my God, this dating pool is just trash. It was terrible. So if you live in a place like that, or let's say you live in Brisbane where there's not that many cute girls, or they have big checklists, literally by being the same guy, obviously you need to be fit, you need to take care of yourself, you need to make money. Like you need to have some certain qualities around the world that are respected. If you just move to, let's say, Romania, I wouldn't move to Romania, but let's say you just go to Romania for a month, or you move to Italy, or you move to one of these places, your chances of finding an extremely attractive girl will go up by 100 times. You'll find your dating pool to be massive. So you might go on Tinder and get 100 matches instead of getting one or two in Australia. So it's, yeah, to your point, I don't want to keep beating it, but yeah, move somewhere else. You'll enjoy dating way more.
Yeah, and a quick little tip for anyone who's watching this who is on the dating apps in the other countries: make sure you don't say you're a traveling entrepreneur in your
Yes.
bio, because the girls will say, they'll swipe left straight away. They'll be like, no, 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 I want some consistency.
Say you just moved to this country.
Yeah,
Always.
yeah,
That's it might be a little bit manipulative, but I just moved to blah blah.
yeah.
It'll work
And
always.
when you're a
Yeah.
citizen of the world, you pretty much live everywhere. So you can do that. But the next one I wanted to talk about was people like some people want to move to one place and they want to settle down there and they want to have that as like their sort of place with their longevity. Other people might want to do 3-3-3-3 or 4-4-4-4 in terms of months per year. I think for me, eventually I'd want to settle down to the point where I'm doing 4 months, 4 months, 4 months in maybe Asia, Europe, and South America, or maybe North America. Um, what is your sort of, do you have a structure that you live year by year in that regard? And what are some of the options and some of the ways that you've seen people doing that?
I have a lot of clients that do 4-4-4. I have clients that do 5.5, 6.5. So they might do 6.5 in Mexico to maintain their permanent residency, and then they'll do 5.5 traveling to Europe. So they don't want to get caught in any tax or anything. And then they might do a month in Dubai just to get there first in order. I don't have any schedule. I pretty much do. So this year, I visited around 14 countries. So I do around 10 to 15 countries a year, new ones, and I'm trying to hit 80 countries by this year. So 80 countries total in my lifetime. I'm always jumping around, so I might spend 2 months in this far eastern place, and then I'll go to Spain for a month because I really like the weather and so on. I might visit my family for a week. So I really jump a lot. This
Mm.
might not be the ideal lifestyle for most people. What you mentioned about 4-4-4, that I think is the perfect lifestyle for most people. And even if you have children, let's say you have children, you have a wife, or you have a girlfriend, and you have if you have an ex-wife and you have some problem with custody, that might be harder. But let's say you just have a girlfriend and a son, you have a 3 people family. You can homeschool that child, and you can register them in Dubai or the Republic of Georgia or many other countries that allow free homeschooling, and you can homeschool them at any time, and you can hire a tutor if you have enough money. They can learn online. They'll learn by traveling through many different countries, so it doesn't really need to hold you back. Because that's one thing that I get a lot is, yeah, you're doing this because you're single and you don't have any kids. I plan to do this forever. I plan to show my kids the world and my girlfriend the world, so it's definitely possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also another place that doesn't really get talked about as much is Africa. But I feel like Africa's been, and I talk about Africa quite a bit on my channel, and I talk about the fact that their economies have been rising like at unbelievable, like breakneck speed since the year 2000. Like from the year 2000 to the year 2015, Africa's rate of abject poverty halved. It's
Mm.
unbelievable statistics when you look at it. And then you've got places like is it Rwanda that's having a real boom in terms of their, and then you've got like Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, that's becoming like a tech hub. Nigeria looks like it's going to have a bigger population than China by the year 2100. And Africa is a place where if people are looking to invest in, then there could be some serious opportunities over there. And also, I'm not sure about what the lifestyle is like over there, but there are some cities that are coming up a little bit. So, what do you know about Africa?
I would say Africa is for the very open-minded. It's a rough place. It has a lot of opportunities. So you could start a business that would be completely not profitable in the Western world and be a multimillionaire in Africa. So you could start a business of literally selling crypto for cash, or a small construction company, or a metal refinery company. I don't know, some really BS company, and make it a multi-million-dollar company just because there's no competition. Now you need to be very careful which countries you go to. You can't just, oh, let me go to Cameroon because it looks good on the map. Well, you might get kidnapped. So you really need to be careful. I would say Rwanda, even though it's geographically not properly positioned, if you see other very, let's say, growing economies or fast growing economies, they have a good geography. The UAE has a good geography, Singapore has a good geography, but Rwanda's in this case where it's like jack in the middle of Africa. It doesn't have really that many transit spots to around the world. It's also a very small country. So it has its challenges, but I think it'll be a great place. I definitely want to visit. Botswana is growing massively. Their economy has exploded over the last 10 years. So that's also something I'm looking at. And obviously South Africa, it's a big country. It's a bit dangerous, but it has a ton of people, great market for hiring employees. And I've personally been to Mauritius and to Seychelles. I've been to Morocco and Egypt, but they're not really Africa. They're more Middle East.
Mm.
But Seychelles and Mauritius, they're incredible countries. And Mauritius, which has one of the best passports in the world, is in Africa, but it's outside of Africa. It's a small island, great for investment, great for opportunities. And overall, I see a lot of potential in Africa. Just, I'm not talking about it that much. I don't know it that much. And also, I've been to Tanzania, and
Mm.
Tanzania that was rough. Like, you go to the capital and you see people literally living in shacks, and there's a dirt road. There's no road. There's just dirt. So that might be a bit of a shock to some people.
Absolutely. And so when you say you're looking at Africa, are you looking at it just to sort of monitor the progress? Because obviously political corruption is a massive issue in Africa, and you wouldn't want to invest your sort of resources or start up a business in a country that has like a political coup a few months later. So are you looking at it in terms of stability and in terms of potential future investments, or are you looking at it as a potential residencies and getting a new passport?
Getting a new passport for sure. I definitely want to have some sort of African tie whenever that comes through. So I'm working on, honestly, they're all really bad passports, but in Africa, it's really hard to get visas for most places. So if you have a passport, like, I don't know, Guinea-Bissau, like a very small African country, that gives you visa free to all its border countries. So now you have
Mm.
like another 20 African countries that you can go to without a visa. So that might open up some borders. And I'm looking at the progress. So I constantly study African trends, African businesses, African countries. And I try to visit one or two African countries per year, even though it's hard for me, but I try to do that.
Yeah. And so, Raphael, you like this is your world, this is your life, this is your business. You help high net worth individuals to move overseas. I wanted to give you the floor for a few minutes to just sort of talk a little bit about the experiences you've had in your business, some of the main objections that you've seen, and also some of the extreme benefits that you've seen in terms of the clients that you've helped and how it's changed their lives and helped them in that regard. So, floor is yours.
For sure. So the best client that I could think of is Martin. He's an Australian national, and he was originally born in Uruguay because his parents wanted him to be born in Uruguay. So he's Uruguayan and he's Australian. He didn't even know that he had an Uruguayan passport. So what a lot of people in some countries around the world don't know is that they can claim another citizenship. And I told him, you were born in Uruguay, therefore you're Uruguayan, claim your passport. So he goes and he claims it, and now he has 2 passports, which is great. And that way, he basically got a passport for like $100. He had to pay the government. Then we helped him move to Dubai. He has a huge software as a service business. Moved to Dubai, pays absolutely zero tax. Had to deal with his Australian side, paid a lot of money in exit taxes. Now lives in Dubai, extremely happy, and is also pursuing, because he's worth tens of millions of dollars, he's pursuing citizenship in Europe as well through the Malta Citizenship by Investment program. You give $1 million to Malta, small European nation, they give you their passport, you can now access all the world, and you can have a strong second passport. So he will have 3 passports, living in Dubai, big family, got a huge villa in Dubai. Kids go to school in a very prestigious Dubai school. And that would be the perfect example of somebody that didn't even know that they could claim a second passport. They didn't know where to go. They didn't really know, oh, can I go there for zero tax or not? And that's the exact client that I'm trying to help. And I have many like that from the US, from Canada. In the US, for example, they tend to favor some countries like Bahamas or Cayman Islands. You can go there, pay zero tax, buy property, and then go through that. So that's our process. The client comes to us. We analyze, oh, what countries are you looking for? What kind of lifestyle do you want? What tax rate do you want to pay? We don't specifically have a product that we want to sell them. We just analyze what they want. We build them a strategy. If they want to go forward, they go for it. And I think everybody should at least have a second home. Just have a residency permit somewhere else, where if your country locks down again and it tells you you can't travel, you can't go anywhere else, well, at least you have a residency permit somewhere else that you can go to.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the main objections that you've seen? I mean, you'd be working with a bunch of different clients. What are some of the things that keep on coming up that you feel like you can sort of dispel the fear about those things?
Family is the biggest one. Oh, my wife doesn't want to move. Where if you're a man and you have a wife, come on, move her. Like, if you're making the money, like, don't be silly. My kids don't want to move. If they're in school, I understand they have their friends and so on. They can make friends in another country. If you want to save another $1 million a year in tax, do it. I have elderly parents. Well, you can move them to Spain and they'll have a better life in Spain anyway. And then you could just buy them a property there. So there's objections for family. The second one is, am I going to get the same healthcare? Am I going to get the same education for my children? Am I going to get the same services? And in most countries around the world that you're going to for tax purposes, unless you're talking about a place like the Republic of Georgia, which is quite underdeveloped, or Turkey, places like Dubai, they have great infrastructure, great healthcare, great education. So you can find those places depending on that. Then the other one would say, I would say those 2 are the main objections. The other one are more personal, like, oh, how is networking in different places? So if you go to Montenegro, it's very beautiful, it's very peaceful, but you're not really going to meet any millionaires there. And that's where the combining places comes in. So you could go to Montenegro for 2 months because you want to think and you want to work on some videos or something. And then you go to Dubai for a month, meet a bunch of cool entrepreneurs. Then you go to London, meet a bunch of other cool entrepreneurs. And the last one would be, although in Dubai it doesn't apply, but let's say you're going to Latin America, would be crime. And you're not going to the slum in Mexico City. You're going to the best areas, probably, in another country. So when people, for example, from Chicago, which is an absolute hellhole right now, they say, oh, I want to move somewhere else, but I don't want to move to Mexico. It's dangerous there. Well, you're moving from Chicago suburbs, a very safe place in a very dangerous area, to the same, a very safe place in a dangerous area, which might even be less dangerous than Chicago. So that I would say is the last objection, where people think, oh, what does he talk about Thailand? When I heard people there like crash their motorbikes all the time. Yeah, you can get a car, like just drive a car around.
That's a good one. And the last question I had for you was in terms of low net worth individuals, people who are just sort of stuck, because I know that there are a lot of individuals who are just starting out in their business journey. They might have an online job, or they might be working towards starting up a business, or they might have a business that's not yet very profitable, and they want to move to a place that is low tax, that is pretty cheap, and is rather easy to get some sort of a worker's permit or residence permit. What are some of the places you'd say for those individuals who can't quite spend the 25 or 100 grand on passports or on residency permits?
I would research digital nomad visas. Typically, they are free or $1,000. So you could get a digital nomad visa in Spain or Portugal or Italy, spend 2 grand, and now you have the right to live there for a year. or you could get a work visa in a place like Thailand. That's $3,000, and you can live pretty comfortably on most of these countries in a low budget. If you go to Portugal, most people live on like 1,500 a month. So
Mm.
if you're making 2 to 3K a month, you can live pretty comfortably. You're not going to ball out. You're not going to stay in a huge apartment or villa, but you're going to have a good lifestyle, probably better than what you're having anywhere else. Because now in Sydney, I think apartments are going for like $2,500 a month, a very small 1 bedroom. Just take that exact same money, get a way bigger place somewhere else, and enjoy your money better. So if you're from the Western world and you're struggling with money, I can guarantee you that if you move somewhere else, you can pick from a basket of countries, ideally Southern Europe or Asia or Latin America. It'll be cheaper to live in one of these countries than it is back home.
Oh, it's such a good point. It's such a good point because there are so many people that, even people that I've spoken to, oh, I really want to live overseas, but I'm not really making much money and it's going to cost me so much to move. And I'm like, man, but when you get to Thailand, you spend $6 a day for 3 meals a day. like, yeah. So 100%, I second that notion. Raphael, where can everybody find you?
You can go to Wealthy Expat on YouTube. That's our main place, or wealthyexpat.com. Our new website is launching in a week, so you can check that out. But on YouTube is where I educate people, where you can find all our guides, tutorials, everything.
Fantastic. And links will all be in the bio and pinned at the top of the comments in YouTube and on Spotify as well. So, Raphael, thank you so much for joining me, brother.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate the opportunity.